So, if you talk to many financial advisors, we really don't adhere to the 4% rule in our practice. The 4% rule is a good rule of thumb for media purposes, for sound bites on social media. It doesn't really work out that way in real life. So, why do I, as a financial advisor, and many other financial advisors believe that? Stay with me. To bring everyone up to baseline, the 4% rule basically says on a portfolio, you can spend 4% of that portfolio each and every year. And if you adhere to 4%, you can basically make the principal last forever. Now, the first problem I have with that is it depends on the principal in the account. It depends on the capital that you put in the account. Okay, if you are spending 4% of a $5 million portfolio, that's $200,000 a year. You can actually make that work and live pretty nice on that. How many people have a $5 million portfolio? If we look at the average retiree retirement account, it has about 274,000 in it. I'm going to round it up to 300,000 just to be generous. If you take 4% of 300,000, that's $12,000 a year or $1,000 a month. Now add the average Social Security, which is about $1,975. If you have a single person, not necessarily a married person, I'm just talking about a single person, between Social Security and the income that they are drawing off of their $300,000 portfolio, you have about $36,000 a year or $3,000 a month. Now, prior to COVID, maybe somewhere in America, if you stuck to maybe small town America or areas with low cost of living, you could push out a living on $3,000 a month. It wouldn't be fabulous, but you could live on $3,000 a month. Post COVID, with the rounds of inflation that we have just had, I don't know anywhere in America where you can comfortably live on $3,000 a month, especially if your home's not paid for, if you have debt, cars, paying off student loans, taking care of kids or family members. It's just not going to be sufficient. So, what typically happens in a situation like that? So, on that $300,000 portfolio, instead of taking out $12,000 a year, the person ends up taking out $24,000 a year. So, that's 8% on that portfolio. So, the 4% rule just went out the window just because of basic need. $12,000 a year isn't going to cut it for most people's retirement. They need more money. Now, if you have 5 million, right? And you need to take out a little bit more money, it's not going to make a whole hill of beans a difference. If you need to take out 400,000 one year, so what? The money will replenish itself because you have enough capital where compounding interest and time will easily take over, and that money taken out will easily be replaced with positive market returns in a very short period of time. 4% can make sense in certain circumstances where you have large sums of capital. But when you have small sums of capital, 4% per year just isn't going to be enough money to make ends meet. So that's one of the issues I have with the 4% rule. The next issue is early market downturns in retirement. And I've talked a little bit about this in some of my other videos, but it's called sequence of returns risk. And when you are considering retirement, you do not want to retire during a recession or during a sustained down market. It's absolutely catastrophic to retirement plans to have a year or 2 or 3 years of successive market negative returns. In situations like that, like in a 2022 or a 2008, I would encourage the soon to be retiree to actually work through that event to get to the other side of it and delay their retirement by a year or two, if at all possible. Large negative returns early on really decimate the 4% rule. There are certain years where it should be a 0% rule for withdrawals on the portfolio. Good example of this was 2022. Trash market, bad year. We had the double whammy of inflation and rising interest rates, which just completely flatlined market performance. Those years, for some retirees, we didn't take anything out of their portfolio. We took money out of their savings account and out of other resources so that they could make ends meet. Because when you're taking out money in a depreciated market, it has an outsized impact on the performance of the portfolio. So the 4% rule isn't each and every year, it isn't across the board. For years with market downturns, it probably should be a 0%. And you probably should be getting that money somewhere else in your portfolio. Another thing that completely makes the 4% rule falls apart is when inflation is running higher. 2022 was an excellent example. We had months where we came at nearly 10% inflation. We were not just battling a down market, we were also battling inflationary forces and trying to handle that double whammy together. So in serious inflationary environments, the 4% rule quickly falls apart, is not applicable, and the client probably should not be taking 4% from the portfolio because we need to basically put out the fire of inflation and in 2022 and a negative market at the same time. So another reason the 4% rule just doesn't work in many cases, and I alluded to this with the 300,000, lifestyle creep, lifestyle creep. And this is tied into inflation too. But like I said, 4% of 300,000 is only $12,000 a year. Even the most frugal of us would struggle to make it on that amount of money. Pretty soon you need to take out 18,000, then 24,000, then maybe $30,000 a year to make ends meet. And that's the point where it becomes really hard to sustain everything. You start seeing the portfolio deplete very quickly, and you're seeing that this person is going to run out of money probably sometime in the next 7 to 10 years at a hard time when they're 80 and they're not going to be able to go back to work. So you have to be very careful about lifestyle creep and resetting expectations. But sometimes lifestyle creep just happens because the cost of living is just so high. Oftentimes, people who get caught in this web of lifestyle creep, they're not going out and buying jets and Lamborghinis or traveling the world. They're just trying to pay bills. They're trying to pay rent. They're trying to pay for food. They're trying to pay for the basic essentials. And it's just that everything has gotten so expensive due to inflation that a 4% draw from their portfolio would never work. And we have to go in and make a deeper withdrawal from their portfolio. Now, the next one, this is not a problem of too little, it's a problem of too much. You risk, if you adhere to the 4% rule, and you have a considerable amount of assets, you really risk underspending your retirement. I have clients who have millions with an S and their adherence of the 4% rule. And I really have to undo that programming to show them that taking 4% every year really doesn't make much sense. And they're going to end up leaving the world with an 8-figure amount of money left to either the next generation or left to charity. Now, if the person is charitably inclined or has a next generation to bequeath that to, that may be fine. But if the person is child free, isn't really charitably inclined, it's a miss. If they leave the world at age 95 with 15 million in the bank, they could have used that money at 55 to travel the world, to dine out, to see friends, to see families, to have fun while they were young and healthy enough to be able to enjoy that money versus just letting it sit in the bank and accumulate interest over 40 years and end up in the hands of charities or sometimes relatives they don't even particularly or know that well. There is a potential they should have been taking out, instead of taking out 4%, they probably should have been taking out anywhere from 8 to 10% and using that money to really enhance the quality of their lives. And they should have done it when they were younger, not necessarily when they were older. They're 95. The only place they're going to spend that money is either a nursing home or a skilled nursing facility, which isn't that much fun. So I have many other thoughts about the 4% rule, but there are many places where the 4% rule doesn't apply. Why do we talk about it as a financial advisor? We talk about it because it's easily accessible to most clients. It's something you can say they've heard of it, they understand it, they can calculate it out themselves. And it's something, there are some people, there are actually a fair number of people that really should adhere to a 4% rule. But I would say probably over half of the people I encounter, it just doesn't make any sense. And it actually complicates their financial picture to hold to a 4% rule versus being more flexible and thinking about how they should spend their money in retirement. So tell me what you think, tell me what you like, and tell me what you don't like. And if you found this information useful, Please share and subscribe. Thank you.